Hey everybody, we're here at Norm's Rare Guitars and we're doing another segment of Ask Norm, but we're going to switch it up. And we did one with Taylor Goldsmith, and now we've got my buddy Joe Bonamassa.
I just come in to pick up my amp that was on repair, and now I'm sitting here. It's great. So thanks for
We
having
put him
me.
to work every
That's right,
time he comes in. You know, Joe, I love Joe. He never refuses me. You know,
Nope.
so. But the cool thing is I get to reverse this a little bit and kind of say, you know, I'd like to ask you a couple questions, knowing that you know so much about vintage guitars and all that. You know, why is it that you play vintage guitars to begin with, and what's your, you know, your love for vintage guitars? Why?
Well, the bug bit me very early. I remember my father sneaking me into a bar named Coleman's in Rome, New York, to see the Dickie Betts Band solo open up for the Greg Allman Band solo, and this is 1982, and I was about less than 6. I was probably 5 and a half, but I was playing guitar. And it was the first time I saw a Sunburst Sunburst Les Paul on stage, and it was a guy named Dan Toller.
I know Dan.
And I remember vividly watching him play from the side of the stage, and this howling sound coming out of this guitar. And my father goes, "Well, that's an old Les Paul. That's what old Les Pauls do." And ever since that day, you know, subsequently I would run into people like Ronnie Earl and, you know, East Coast based blues guys, and they would always have an old Strat or an old Telecaster. Danny Gatton I took lessons from, he had a 53. So the correlation of great sound and old instruments has been ingrained in my DNA. And what I've found out over my years is the difference between, this is a 1960 blonde ES335, and the difference between a guitar you could buy today and this, I always find it comes down to the last 15%. And the last 15% is the inspiration that the instrument gives to the artist, and the ability to change dynamically from a very, you know, quiet, you know, part to full on, you know, jet engine blast through the amp. That's what vintage guitars really allow you to do, is the dynamic range and that inspiration that you get personally as an artist that gives you that extra 15% in the sound and the performance, and hopefully it translates to the audience.
There's a lot of you like reliving, hearing some of your idols playing back then and all that. But the old wood, the alloys and the pickups and the winds and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, you know, they've tried to reverse engineer it. So much so that I heard some people took a real M69 cream surround for a 59 Les Paul, ground it up into a fine paste, genetically re-engineered it and cast new molds. I'm all cool with that, you know, as long as you put "I made a fake" on the bottom of it, so people like me who buy this stuff, you know, don't get fooled. I think ultimately, a lot of the sound comes from the craftsmanship, the fact that the wood was old to begin with, right. When these things were built, the lacquer settling in over 50 some odd years. There was a reason why people started collecting these things literally less than 10 years after they were made. It was just like, there was people who were into this stuff, knew quality when they seen it, and they recognized that part of the 50s, at least for electric guitars, was a golden era. You know, both Fender and Gibson, those 5 to 10 years.
That stuff already sounded good, even though it was relatively new, right?
Leo got it right every time, straight out of the box. The Broadcaster, the Stratocaster, the P-Bass, the amp stuff. You know, Ted McCarty and Gibson got it right almost out of the box. I mean, you know, the early versions of these had a kind of a funky neck angle, but you know, okay, you know. But it's still a classic guitar.
There were a bunch of real innovators, Seth Lover and those guys. I mean,
Seth Lover,
they must have had some.
Les Paul, you know, he had some to do with it.
Vision, yeah.
You know, it wasn't an immaculate conception.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a.
It was a team effort. Yeah,
especially on the Les Paul guitar.
Right. Thanks to Nick's countrymen, you know, the Beatles and the Stones and all that back in the day, all of a sudden, production went insane on guitars. Every kid had to have a guitar.
Absolutely.
They couldn't wait and search for the old wood and, be as selective. They had to bring in people off the streets to make guitars because they had a demand that they had to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Production line. Yeah.
You could buy guitars at Sears, and those are cool. You know, what I mean, like you could buy them at Montgomery Ward's, and that was
Valco stuff.
That was-
And you're right, they're collectible now.
They're-
Some of them. Yeah.
everything's collectible. I mean, like you think about it, like guitars that were kind of dismissed, like 70s Strats, are rapidly becoming 45 and 50 years old.
Right.
I mean, it's almost a half a century. You forget about it. Like I was on Jimmy Kimmel. They were nice enough to let me sit in with the band, and I brought one of my Les Pauls, and I brought a 45-watt Tweed Twin that has been my kind of in-town workhorse amplifier. That thing has been done so many gigs at the Baked Potato, so many sessions. Quiet. It's old reliable. I needed it for 1 hour between the taping hours of 5 and 6 p.m. During the Greg Kinnear interview, the tube started to go, and and they cut it out of the West Coast broadcast, but the amp started just like making weird noises, and the audience could hear it. I'm like quickly run over and hit it on standby, and you go, this is kind of the fun of these old things. You never know when they're just going to burn up, and and it sounded fine.
And they can be fixed easily and just
Fixes
put
nothing
back
to
together.
it. It's like working on
not
a
big thing.
57 Chevy. There's nothing to
Except
it.
there's less movable parts. So.
Exactly. So, but sorry to Greg Kinnear. I wrecked his interview with my amp.
There was one question that one of the guys was asking about using vintage guitars on gigs. Right?
Yeah.
You remember who
what?
that was?
Let me just. Okay, yeah, it was from Andy Bowen, who says, what's your opinion on gigging vintage guitars? Probably the best person to ask ever. And he runs through a little bit of gear he has, but he says, I kind of wondering if maybe a pickup might die during a gig or something horrible might happen. So what's your take on that?
Well, personally, I was in here the other day, and I brought in a 59 Les Paul, and there was a kid from England in here from London, and he remarked something like he had not been that close to a 59 Les Paul, and my question to him was like, have you ever dropped a guitar? And he goes, no. And so I hand him the 59 Les Paul. I go, don't start now. And the thing is, Mike Hickey, my guitar tech, has been with us for 5 years, knows more about vintage guitars than I do, loves this stuff just as much as I do, and takes care of the instruments. Last year when we did the Three Kings tour, we had 2 original Flying V's, we had an Explorer that were on loan, we had 2 59 Les Pauls, we had 3 of these kind of dot neck 345s. I mean, the amount of intrinsical value that was in that rack was, even like for me, I was going, we're a little bit crazy. Because it was all original stuff and very valuable. But the idea is, if you're not going to play them, then I personally can't justify owning them. If you're just going to hang them on the wall, put them in a black glass case, or just, I don't know, trade them like blue chips. To me, this thing here was made to be played. Just play it, don't abuse it. Don't put it in situations where, if it's a crowded bar, don't lean it up on a rickety old stand. Just
Right.
Common sense things that you would treat a brand new guitar the same way.
Speaking of which, I was on the Blues Cruise with you.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Joe is the only guy I know, and I don't want to say crazy enough, but
Crazy enough, yeah.
crazy enough to use one of his real 59s out on deck,
Yes.
on the ship,
Yep.
and it started to rain.
It did start to rain. It's almost a guarantee. If I play outside, it will rain. I mean, that is just an absolute. We should do a gig here in LA outside because it will rain. And we
The
need the rain.
rainmaker. Yeah.
I am the rainmaker. That particular guitar, that was Spot. Spot has been through the war and back, and it didn't rain so hard, and we had a B plan. And you kind of gauge, you see a little few droplets hit the guitar. It's okay, fine. I mean, if it was torrential rain, then you have to get rid of it, because then it's just guitar abuse at that point. And
Has that actually happened? Have you had torrential rain pouring in where it's gonna like get in the pickups?
There's always a there's always a B plan. There's always a spare.
Right.
And the show must go on. So if you take a nice reissue and you have to wipe it down, or the pickups die because they got too wet, then you put a new set of reissue pickups in, and they sound great. But there's only one chance to mess up a vintage guitar. My theory, especially with amps, is 25 years to collect it, 25 seconds to mess it up. You know what I mean? Like poke a hole in the grill and tear the tweed. You gotta be careful. Like I'm really careful with the tweed stuff. I don't gig the mint tweed stuff. I don't. I can't justify it.
Yeah.
What I thought was really cool though is these people paid for tickets, and they want to see Joe Bonamassa, and you're giving them 100%. You're not going, well, I'll use this, that, or the other thing. That'll be good enough. The feeling I got from you was good enough isn't good enough.
One of the most common, like when we do shows, just our Monday through Sunday show, when the Flying V's saw me, Amos comes out, there is an increased amount of flash activity in the audience because people have not seen a real. There's a good portion of the people that know what it is, and they haven't seen one that close. And same thing with the Les Pauls or the custom color fenders that will tote around.
It's an event to see a real V.
And for nerds like us, like I do the same, and part of my job is to share this stuff with other people, not just hoard it and go, well, it's mine now. It's like, hey, you want to play it? I let kids play. One kid came up. It's like, my dream in life is to play a Mary Kay Strat. I said, well, you can play a blonde over ash 50s guitar. If you really got to have one, if you really want to play one of the gold parts, here you go. I let them play it. I go, the gold parts don't add anything to the sound. They just look cool.
Making dreams come true.
Well,
Joe Bonamassa.
And the idea is those are the future connoisseurs and buyers and people that are going to like go out, become professionals, go be musicians or whatever, and then go, hey, my dream in life, man, I remember when I was a kid, I played this Mary Kay Strat. They'll be for future customers. And if you don't kind of perpetuate the young, if you don't like encourage the younger generation to get into this stuff, I mean, it could run the risk of just falling into the hands of about 24 curmudgeons, with
and you'll never see the guitars
with
again.
Safes and it's like
we need a new generation of people that are going to go out and gig this stuff. Keep the flame alive.
Meeting in a secret place in like this brick building somewhere in Cleveland, Ohio. It's like
buried underground.
That's not fun.
No, but I mean, like for instance, the original V that you have. The Amos that you got from me. When you play that and you play like a reissue V, what do you hear in different ones?
Well, the backup to Amos is my '81 A Series Carina V that I've had for many years. It's the same one if you're familiar with any of my work. At the end of the 2009 Albert Hall gig, I got up on Carmine Rojas's bass cabinets and I held it over my head. I go, look, Mom, look what I did. Same guitar, only I put a black pickguard on it, so it kind of looks like the real thing. And the difference is, I don't know who built those guitars in '81. The difference is they're thinner to the touch. They're actually thinner than the real ones. The neck joined in a different place. It sounds okay, but when you plug in the real one, the entire thing just makes sense at that point. Like it does that really stratty thing in the front position, and that kind of howling, bitey back pickup, where the reissue is just a little bit more generic, but still good and still retains that kind of flying V quality. I mean, albeit you're talking a guitar that's worth $5,000 versus whatever. And
85% is pretty good, and that will work for most people. And depending on your pocketbook, that's where you may have to be, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean, and part of the fun is if you do take a cheap guitar or whatever guitar, and part of the fun is trying to get those tones out of your hands and out of your soul and out of your just your technique, and you don't need a six-figure guitar to
it
rule the
kinda
world. You can do it in Epiphone if you want.
helps you to stretch, right? If you've got a guitar that's gonna go on the journey with you,
Well,
kind of thing.
sometimes if the guitar fights you, that creates a sound as well.
As well, yeah.
And
yeah.
it's functional art. I mean,
It is
you got
functional.
something that, where you buy a baseball card or, most art, it's just to look at. And, this, you're getting a sound out of
Right.
the thing, and it's got a soul
Yeah.
and a history, where if you look at a baseball card, it's like, well, that's really cool, and about
Yeah.
60 seconds later, you go, well, I saw that, and you put it away. The guitar, you can work with it, they're durable.
Create
you know.
music with it. I mean, like, just think about it in terms of a really expensive old stamp. You couldn't even if you wanted to put it on a letter, you couldn't send it. You didn't pay enough money for it.
Right.
The post office wouldn't recognize the stamp. You know what I mean? Like, so,
And if you bend the corner, you're screwed.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like all those. There's kind of a whole side of collectibles where people want it untouched. People want it it's like
Unstamped,
toys
right.
and
Yeah.
in original boxes. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's a different thing. I mean,
But
like here, if you take
that's
care
a
of
nerd
it.
of a different color. I mean, thank God we all like different things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these, if you take care of them, you can play them. Just take your rings off, take your belt off. Don't. I'm very careful who I hand guitars to sometimes, especially famous rock people, because they tend to dress like famous rock people with big rings. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Not on my guitar.
no,
Yeah.
take those off. But anyway.
Oh, that's funny.
I remember years ago, this is a goofy story, but I was playing at the Starwood, and they had this big stage that was way up, and they had a walkway. And I was playing with my friend Rick Vito,
Right.
and we had this guy, Joe Uwaley, who played with John Mayall for many years on drums. And what was really funny is Buddy Miles comes walking down. We just, we're trying to do like a showcase set of our tunes,
Right.
Buddy Miles comes walking down, and Joe, our drummer, probably weighed every bit of about 100 pounds, and Buddy Miles was a very big guy.
He's a big guy.
And he came down, and he had a reputation of playing very hard on the drums and destroying people's
Right,
drum
right.
sets. And he walked down, and he said to Joe, the drummer, he said, "Hey, I'm Buddy Miles, I'm gonna sit in." And Joe looked at him and went, "Fuck you." And Buddy kind of walked back up the stairs, kind of, with his tail between his legs,
You come sit in, buddy. Just bring your own drums.
Yeah. You know what? Let's take one question off this sheet because I got two guys here that know more about this question than anybody else. Joshua Knight wants to know. It says, "Hey Norm, I wanted to know how much 58 and 59 Les Pauls go for at the moment, and how often you can come by them. Obviously, they're extremely desirable. So you guys are
That's
probably
a
the
Joe
world's
question
well,
right now.
the world's leading expert.
Well, no, the 58, 59, 60s, it's a bouncing, it really is. I mean, I always tell people it's go to Red Lobster and order, the surf and turf. Okay, it's market price. It's really only as much as somebody's willing to pay for it.
Right.
I mean, if you want a perfect one with a huge top, get ready to pay over 500 grand. If you don't care so much about the wood, or you'll take a few issues, they're in the twos at the moment.
Change tuners, maybe less flamey.
Generally 59,
Bigsby or
Bigsby, snake bite,
repair here and there, refret.
if you don't mind a broken neck or a re-neck, then you're under $100,000. Generally most of the times with 59 Les Pauls, there's two or three common issues, and you always say add $1. It's the tendency in the 70s were the tuners. They always said these Clousons were bad. I don't find them to be bad. They work fine if you get a fresh set. Grover it, or they would shallow.
Well, that was the thing back then. You walk
Grover's
in the
would-
music store and say, "This is what you need: some
Yeah.
DiMarzios and
Right.
showers."
And in the days before they could tell what color the bobbins were, the only way to really determine was to pop the
Pop the
cover.
thing up.
So your common issues with any 58 or 59, a lot of times it's been grovered, or the covers have been off, or in this, everybody's now is big on solder joints. Well, people experimented with pickups, and they didn't really think a solder joint would be legally binding. But in 2016, there's a team of forensic scientists in there with some kind of microscopic technology that they can tell if,
Analyzing the
a
solder.
weller's ever entered the cavity of the guitar.
Yeah.
Anyway, that kind of stuff doesn't bug me. What you really got to watch is with old guitars is, has there been any finish work done? Has there been holes that have tried to, does it blacklight fine? 'Cause
Right.
I owned a guitar that had a broken headstock. It was a 1960, and it was sold to the gentleman as not a broken headstock, but we kindly had to tell him it was a broken headstock, but it was a absolutely invisible repair. And it's that kind of thing. Is make sure that the provenance of the guitar is good, and make sure that the person you're buying is trustworthy and has a good reputation, because you could lose so much money in such a short period of time.
As long as you get what you're paying for.
Yeah.
If you're buying something that is modded and you know it and you're paying the modded price, okay.
Fair
if
enough,
you're
yeah.
buying it thinking that it's 100% original and being represented as being 100% original and you're paying that price,
Right.
that's bad.
And without a doubt, this is the most counterfeited guitar model ever.
Yeah, and they in this business and in collecting and stuff like that, they counterfeit everything. I had a recent example where I love point of purchase stuff. Okay, I love old Fender clocks. I love old Fender signs, Gibson signs. You name it. My whole house is decorated with this stuff. And I have 3 original Fender clocks, and I have 1 fake. And the 1 fake, I keep in eyesight of my stuff at all times, is to remind me that you don't know everything, and they will fake a 59 Les Paul, and they will fake a 1963 Pam clock just as easily. If there's money to be made, they're going to fake it. And the thing about it is, before you just dive into the pool and go, I'm going to collect it all, is, buy the books, buy your book, and
Do your research.
do your research, and just come hang around it for a minute before you start getting involved, because the more you handle these things, the more your eyes start to see, and
You recognize the texture of the finish and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
and you also recognize that there are some factory anomalies that they did. I mean,
Sure.
you've run across stuff that's and sold me stuff like the White Super that's like a
Yep.
factory anomaly. It's like that doesn't exist in the catalog, but there it is. It's
It was
real.
an amp that came from Porky Freeman, who used to
Right.
work for Fender. He was the guy who designed the Marauder with the pickups under the pick guard. And I bought a Marauder from him, and I bought several things, and one was this White Super amp that was experimental. It never went into production.
Yeah, and it's like the same thing if you're getting into Blackguard Telecasters or any kind of Fender stuff. It's like, because with a Gibson, it's harder to take this apart. With a Fender, all you need is a Phillips head screwdriver, and so there's a few things you need to know, and before you get in, and also just most importantly, just buy from a reputable person. It's like that's why it's like Norm and I have known each other for years, and like when I was like I decided I wanted a Carina V, I didn't ask anybody else. I just asked you, because I knew it was real, and that kind of peace of mind, knowing that stuff that you have is real, it trumps any kind of deal that you could get on Craigslist. You don't buy a 58 Flying V on Craigslist.
Craigslist.
You don't buy it on eBay. You don't buy it from anybody other than reputable people that know and have been around it for years. And you, not only do you learn about it, you also sleep comfortably at night knowing peace of mind that thing that's sitting in that wedge-shaped case was made in Kalamazoo, Michigan, May 28th. It was shipped May 28th, 1958. Done. And that's all you really need to know.
Well, there has been things that have been offered to me that are unquestionably right. There's some things that are unquestionably wrong, and there's some things that have been a little gray. And if they're gray, I shy away from them because
Right.
I don't want to represent something as being one thing, finding out that it's something else. If I'm not absolutely sure, we try to, tell people everything we know about this stuff.
Right.
And if I'm not positive, I'd rather take a pass than
Yeah.
dive in and find out that there was something drastically wrong.
While we're on it, there's one thing I noticed when Joe opened the case for this thing. One thing they've never been able to counterfeit, and that's the smell of an old Gibson guitar in it.
Yeah, a lot of times, a lot of that smell is the case
Is the
itself.
case, yeah, and the glue.
And I traveled with the Les Pauls in 1970
Sorry,
something
guys.
something protector cases.
Yeah, like
It doesn't-
chainsaw cases.
Yeah, the
and stuff,
chainsaw
yeah.
cases. And they're great because they're actually designed to be indestructible, and they're really easy
Yeah.
to carry around, and nothing happens. But what I do, the first thing I do when I get off tour is I put the Les Pauls back in the original
real
case because they lose their smell after a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to run because
All right,
I have
well-
I got to get my amp and go.
Before you do that, can you just doodle, noodle, or
right.
whatever you'd like to do a little bit, just...
So the idea when we were talking about old guitars is a lot of times when you play them, there's a warmth and a sound quality that and like we're just playing through a Fender DeVille, which is fine. What people don't realize is that most of the sound, is okay. It's the wood, it's the construction, but a lot of people never. It's think of it. It's the whole chain of events that happens. It's the wood, it's the frets, but okay, it's the PAFs. So you can rip the PAFs out, put them in a new guitar. It doesn't quite sound the same. Why? Because these pots, these Central Lab pots, these were military spec back when they actually put these pots in B-52 bombers, so they made a ton of them to a very high standard. So Gibson would just buy them from whoever, and the capacitors, the wire, everything, that whole signal chain to the jack is really, really critical in the clarity of the guitar, because a lot of times now it's like if you go from 0, it's like this kind of like very
It starts at 5. And
it
comes on
jumps,
real
and
strong,
like
yeah.
with these, it's seamless, and a lot of times you turn it down to 4 or 5, it still chimes you. By the way, don't tell anybody, but these things will most likely, if you get a good one, will kill any 58, 59, or 60 Les Paul. Oh, they're burst killers. They sound so good, especially when I plug them in. We just did the tour. I plug them in next to the Les Paul. I go, oh man, the 335 sounds better. Why did I get into these?
All the
The Les
original
Paul
blues
killer.
guys, that was the style
Well,
guitar
They
played.
howl. They do that prototypical burst thing better than the Les Paul does. It's just,
And the one thing that you didn't say is that more than anything, it's in the hands of the player.
that's 100%
true.
true.
And I want to thank you for, you really practiced that stuff I showed you, and you're really getting good at it. So,
I've been going between your lessons and Mel Bay Book 2. I'm almost ready for Mel Bay Book 3.
All right.
well,
Cheers, guys.
I got to just say, he is, in my opinion, the greatest young blues player, carrying the torch, doing all the stuff, and he really gets a beautiful sound, and 99% of it's you, but having a great tool
And
that
a great
helps
tool
too.
always helps. So.
Here's the great tools.
Joe Bonamassa.
Cheers. Thanks,
Cheers,
guys.
Joe.
Thank you, my
Thanks,
friend.
Norm. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.